Yeah. This is all in black and white so far, so there's no colors here. Hopefully the colors will come out. So in the middle, we have the central sulcus. We have your lateral fissure that separates that boxing glove piece from the rest. And separating the right and left halves of the brain. Let's put that up here. The longitudinal fissure separates the left and right sides of the brain. Okay, that's its purpose in life. Okay, let's talk about lobes of the brain. Okay, I'm just going to start to put some things here. The central sulcus is really important because it separates two main lobes of the brain. Let's talk about this front part of the brain right here. Does anyone know what this lobe of the brain? Yeah, that's the frontal lobe. It's in the front. I said it, right? That's going to be your frontal lobe. Okay? Your frontal lobe encompasses all this in here. Okay. When I talk about yes, Abby. This is kind of like a dark blue. It doesn't really matter right now. This is just basic labeling. It'll matter in a minute. I'll get there. But for the frontal lobe, as far as function, if I had to assign a function to the frontal lobe, does anyone know what it's responsible for? It does
Executive function.
Sorry?
Executive function.
Executive function. Okay, so you can talk about, let's say, cognition. Let's broaden that. So executive function is a small part of cognition. But let's talk just basic cognition for frontal lobe. Cognition, memory is a good one. If you also, so you think about people with Alzheimer's, you can say personality, cognition, personality. But as far as being a PT is concerned, there's a really important function that we'd have to know about that is associated with the frontal lobe.
Is it the motor or premotor?
Yeah, it's motor. Yes, motor function. Frontal lobe is going to be really important for motor function. Okay. Now here's where the color becomes important. Usually I like to do motor with red. Okay. Does anyone know the part of the brain where that's responsible for what's the primary motor cortex, or what's the part of the brain where it is? It's so here's your central sulcus. In front of your central sulcus, there's this fold or ridge, and it's going to live right here. That's right, and it's called your precentral gyrus. So here is your precentral, so it's in front of the central sulcus, and it's a gyrus. Precentral gyrus, and that's going to be motor. This is where all your motor function is emanated from. It's called your primary motor cortex, also known as your precentral gyrus. Like I said, we'll go through this in a lot more detail. This is just a big overview. Okay, yeah.
The motor cortex. The motor cortex is the precentral gyrus.
Correct. Primary motor cortex is the precentral gyrus. For right now, all you need to know is the precentral gyrus is in the frontal lobe, and it is responsible for motor function. Anybody else? Okay, now, there's this precentral gyrus, and right behind, and I like to make this one green, as I said before, there's going to be a special kind of gyrus behind the central sulcus. Any guesses on what that one's called?
Sensory cortex.
More specific, so this is going to be your postcentral gyrus. Okay, and your postcentral, so in your frontal lobe, precentral gyrus motor function. And the lobe right behind it, your postcentral gyrus, and that's somatosensation. This is where all somatosensation gets interpreted. Somatosensation. Okay? Where it gets delivered. And this is all part of, there's another lobe separated by the central sulcus from the frontal lobe, and that lobe exists here. Anybody know what lobe is right behind the frontal? Yeah, that's your parietal lobe. Good. So this is your parietal. Back here. So, your parietal lobe is going to be the place, and specifically your postcentral gyrus, is where those pathways we talked about before, the special senses and well, most of them, and the STT and the DCML, they deliver that information here to your postcentral gyrus. We'll talk about that. Yes, Camille?
What does it say on top of the postcentral gyrus, like your arrow?
Somatosensation? Yeah, so all your somatosensation. So what's the word somatosensation mean? Does anybody know? Sensation coming from where? Somato. Body. Sensation coming from your body. So sensations coming from your body are what are called somatosensations. Or somato means body. Any other questions? And this is the parietal lobe. So essentially here's your frontal lobe. Houses your motor. Your parietal lobe. And one of the main functions of your parietal lobe is going to be somatosensation. All right. And then you have this lobe back here. Anybody know what the lobe back here is? Occipital. Good. And what do we standardly associate with occipital lobe as far as function? Vision. Awesome. That's going to be vision. Okay, so we have frontal, parietal, occipital. Okay, this guy back here, you've already told me, this is your cerebellum. Okay, your cerebellum. What's your cerebellum responsible for?
Balance, coordination.
Yeah, balance and coordination. Perfect. You must be looking ahead at the PowerPoint.
Just like mine. Sorry.
Balance and coordination. But that was perfect response. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about how the cerebellum works as far as coordination is concerned, as well as balance. Okay, well that comes through your cerebellar lobe. And then we talked about the lateral fissure, which is this big old groove here that separates the anterior lobe from this other lobe back here. Does anybody know what that lobe is? Temporal, yeah. And what's the temporal lobe associated with?
Auditory.
Auditory, right, hearing. Let's just say hearing. So it's really interpretation of sounds. Okay, and then if we had to go through, just for fun, what's the uppermost portion of the brainstem called? Yeah, that's your midbrain. Good. Remember, that's going to be the point at which the neuroanatomical relationship words change. Okay, there's your midbrain. Next one down is your pons. And then you have your medulla. Bless you.
Thank you.
And then below that's your spinal cord. Like I said, this is just getting everybody familiar with what's happening. Questions? Yes, Hannah.
Is the postcentral
Gyrus?
in the parietal lobe or the?
It's in the parietal lobe. So the central sulcus separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. That's just the word for that big old imagination there. Okay? Yes.
Does the parietal lobe have any specific functions?
Somatosensation.
Oh.
That's going to be the somatosensation. Maybe it's confusing if I wrote it down here. I will put parietal somatosensation. We'll talk more about other specific areas that are associated with somatosensation as we go through the rest of the semester. But in general, when you hear parietal lobe, you think sensory. Okay, you should think sensory. Frontal motor. Hmm?
It's like, what's it called? When your body's in space.
Proprioception is one of them. So vibration, proprioception, crude touch, fine touch. What are the other two? Pain and temperature. They're all your big ones for
And
sensations.
that's somaticism.
Those are all somatic sensations. That's right. Coming in from the environment, from your body. Other questions? Does it make sense? See where we're going? Okay. Now, let's move on to the next one you have should be gray versus white matter. Okay. I've been told some people spell gray, G-R-A-Y, some people spell it G-R-E-Y. I say I'll do both. Now, think about this is a section through the brain. What kind of section is it? It's not sagittal this time. If I said
Oh,
coronal,
frontal.
yeah, coronal frontal, right? This is going to be a coronal section through the brain. That's what you're seeing there. Okay. If we have to go through, let's do that. And does anybody know what this is? This is a transverse section through something. Does anybody know what that's a transverse section through? Yeah, that's your spinal cord. Awesome. There's your spinal cord. So just two things that you're looking at here. This is going to be a frontal or coronal section through the brain. So here's the cortical region. Ooh, having said that, what did I say was this big invagination separating left and right halves? Anybody remember? Yes, that's your longitudinal fissure. It's easier to see here, so I'm going to label it. Longitudinal fissure. Okay. Good. Now you can have a better feel for where we are. If I have to think about gray versus white matter, does anyone know the difference? What is this?
Gray, like or stores of duration, white transports of duration.
Close.
Myelination.
Myelination is what?
Like, what do you like? What
White
do
or
you
gray?
White.
Good. Okay. Myelination. Okay. So and so let's see. So LA said the gray is storing information and the white's transmitting information. And Gio says that white matter is myelinated. If white matter is myelinated, what part of a neuron is it? Axon. Yeah. So white matter is going to be the axons coming out of the gray matter. If the white matter is the axon, what does that make the gray matter? Dendrite. Well, dendrites are the little shoots coming off the big thing that I'm looking for. There's a word.
Soma.
Soma is a good word. Another word is cell body. Okay, it's your soma or your cell body. So let me go ahead and draw that for you. Usually like gray. So your gray matter is yours. I'm going to represent that as. So you can see that? Yeah. This is going to be your cell body or your soma. Either is fine. So it's gray in color. Okay, that's going to be your cell body. You know, another word for cell body is soma. Either is fine. Okay, so I'm thinking about gray matter. That's going to be the cell body of the neuron. Now, when I'm thinking about the white matter, I'm going to make that here, and for the sake of visualization, I can't draw it white, so I'm going to make it kind of a slate fluorescent orange. This is going to be that axon coming off of the cell body. Does everybody see that? So there's my. So I'm going to label that. That's my axon. Okay. And it's myelinated. A myelinated axon. That just means it has a sheath of myelin wrapped around the axon itself. We'll talk more about myelination and what cells are responsible for it in the CNS and PNS as the semester goes on. But for right now, you should think gray matter, cell body, white matter, myelinated axons, or axons is fine. Okay, the axons. So that's the transmitting information. Now, when you think about what I've drawn here is just an individual neuron. Okay, it has a cell body here in gray, and then my myelinated axon is coming off. It's going to make a connection. So what happens is, there's not just one neuron. I hope you all have neuron firing, you're good, right? So it's more than one, you got a bunch in there, right? So these guys form collections. So the cell bodies tend to collect together, so these are all cell bodies. And then all those cell bodies have axons or myelinated axons that are coming out of them. Here, you can imagine, they tend to collect, right? So, you know, what you'll see is when we get the brains, when we pull the brains, you're actually going to see the gray matter versus the white matter. And it is gray matter, it's gray in color, versus white matter is going to be a white in color. Okay. As far as the gray matter is concerned, I'll stay over here. Like I said, the gray matter is going to be the neuronal cell body or the soma in the central nervous system. That's either the brain or the spinal cord, right? Either one is fine. So let's say the gray matter in the CNS or central nervous system is found in two different places for the most part. It's going to be found in the outer cortex or the outer cortical region of the brain. Okay, so when I say that the gray matter in the central nervous system is found in the outer cortical region of the brain, I'm going to draw that here. Okay, this is all gray matter. What are these things that are here on the outside? It's not a trick question. What are these things? What resides out here? What's that? What are those things called? Those are your cell bodies. All your cell bodies are on the outside. They're on the periphery in the brain, in the CNS. Okay, I'm just going to draw a few of them here. So the outer cortical region is nothing more than collections of neuronal cell bodies. Okay. I'm just drawing in a bunch here. So when I ask you what's out here, the answer is neuronal cell bodies are out there. And as you can see, out of these neuronal cell bodies, all these axons are going to come down and they're going to form the white matter that you see. So if you do a coronal section of the brain, you can see this gray matter out here, nothing more than neuronal cell bodies. Okay? You're also going to see the white matter. And the white matter is nothing more than the axons coming down here out of the neuronal cell bodies. Okay? And then that's one place in the CNS when there's gray matter. This other place in gray matter is here. I'll draw it in. These are like islands of gray matter in the middle of all that white matter. And these islands of gray matter have a special name in the CNS. Sorry?
Ventricles.
Ventricle? No, the ventricles are going to be the holes in the brain. We'll talk about that on Tuesday, maybe next Tuesday. Anybody? These are called nuclei. Okay? Specifically in the CNS, islands of gray matter in the center are known as nuclei, collections of nuclei. Okay, one of the most important nuclei we're going to talk about this semester is this guy here. This is your thalamus. Major relay area for somatosensory information. We'll get there. Well, that's just an example. And then you have, you have your basal ganglia here. I mean, let's just say putamen. These are just examples. Okay, let's just say this is a caudate nucleus. These are just examples of gray matter that exist in the CNS. Okay, and specifically, I'm just looking at the brain right now. Okay, when I come down here and I look at the spinal cord, as far as the gray matter is concerned, the gray matter is all in here. So remember, the spinal cord's part of the CNS. So these are all areas of gray matter, which means they're nothing more. Do you have a question, Sam? So you do. Somebody else
Sorry,
does.
is that something called sulcus?
Oh, caudate nucleus.
Caudate nucleus,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's all right. Caudate nucleus. Yeah, Camille?
What is the bottom one?
There's thalamus and putamen. P-U-T-A-M-E-N. And these are just words. You'll get the meaning of the words and what they are. But the point is, these are just collections of gray matter inside. They're islands of gray matter inside all that white matter. And in the CNS, they're called nuclei. And all I've done is just shown you, introduced you to some of the nuclei that we're going to talk about this semester. Okay, the thalamus is the big one. We're going to see him a lot. When we talk about basal ganglia, we'll see the putamen and the caudate nucleus. So we're not there yet. This is just a big overview of all that stuff. Other questions? Yeah, stop me and ask me questions. I'm fine with it. Okay, so in the spinal cord too, so all these are neuronal cell bodies here. And on the outside of the spinal cord, these are all your myelinated axons in the CNS. So these are your white matter in the spinal cord, and we're going to spend a lot of time on the spinal cord. You'll be very familiar with this. But all your white matters around the outside, and the gray matters in the middle for your spinal cord. Okay. As far as your gray matter in the CNS, like I said, you have your outer cortical region, and then you have your nuclei. For your white matter in the CNS, it's right here. There's a lot of different names. This is where people get confused sometimes. As time goes on, you're going to hear these words again. But when you hear these words, and there's a whole lot of them, they mean nothing more than myelinated axons in the CNS. Okay? Examples of words are going to be column, C-O-L-U-M-N. So you hear something like we talked about dorsal column, medium lemniscus. The column is nothing more than a collection of white matter going through the CNS. Okay, another one is a tract. You'll hear the word tract. We talked about the spinal thalamic tract. Nothing more than a collection of white matter going through the CNS. Another one, fasciculus. Yeah, don't worry. F-A-S-C-I-C-U-S. Fasciculus. Okay. Lemniscus. Dorsal column medial lemniscus. L-E-M-I-N-C-U-S. Okay. There's also something called a peduncle. So inferior, middle, and superior cerebellar peduncle, P-E-D-U-N-C-L-E. Okay, when you hear these words, that means nothing more than a collection of white matter in the CNS. Another one is going to be a commissure, C-O-M-M-I-S-U-R-E. Okay, and probably there's a commissure or decussation. It's just, in general, a decussation or a commissure is going to be going from one side of the brain to the other. And there's a famous commissure that connects the left and right halves of the brain. Does anyone know what that one is? Corpus callosum. Good. Okay. This is an example of a commissure here, and it's called the corpus C-A-L-L-O-S-U-M, corpus callosum. And it's the biggest commissure that you have in your brain, and it's very visible. You're going to see me draw it a bunch, and when we pull the brains, you're definitely going to be able to see the corpus callosum. Just nothing more than a collection of white matter axons that are connecting the left and right halves of the brain. Okay. Now, let's go back, look at this PNS. So, gray matter in the CNS is outer cortical region and nuclei. In the PNS, a collection of neuronal cell bodies in the PNS are known as ganglia. 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 Okay, probably the one that we're going to talk about the most resides here. Two of them. And just outside the spinal cord is the first order neuron, and it is the dorsal root ganglia. This is the dorsal root. Dorsal root ganglia. So don't get hung up on knowing what all these things are quite yet. As I said, this is a big overview. I'm just introducing you to words, and these words should mean something. Okay, yes, Ian?
Could you repeat the last two words under CMS white?
Commissure and decussation. C-O-M-M-I-S-U-R-E. So anterior white commissure. Corpus callosum is an example of a commissure. Decussation is D-E-C-U-S-S-A-T-I-O-N, and it's nothing more than crossing over somewhere. Decussating. What's decussates, though, is myelinated axons. Any other questions? This is the one that always gets everybody. All these big words, you haven't heard that. You will be very familiar with them by the end of the semester. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the lateral surface of the brain. Almost done. Okay, quick review. Ready? What's this thing in the middle of the brain that separates the frontal from the parietal lobe? Does everybody remember? Central sulcus. Okay, this guy is your central sulcus. Okay, part of the frontal lobe of the brain. If I have to label it, here's my frontal lobe that's associated with motor function. What's that thing called? Does anybody remember? What's this thing right in front of the central sulcus called? Precentral sulcus. Good. And then in the parietal lobe, okay, which is back here, there's my parietal lobe. In the parietal lobe, I have this other thing that's called my postcentral sulcus. Good. Okay, that's involved. So precentral gyrus, motor, postcentral gyrus, somatosensation. Okay. So here you go. This is motor, and this is somatosensation. Okay. There's something very special about the pre and post central gyrus as far as how the body is represented in these areas. And they're both the same. The special word, it's called a homunculus. Has anyone ever heard of the word homunculus before? Yeah? Okay. The homunculus is nothing more than a representation of a human body. The way that I like to remember it is the guy in the homunculus is standing on his head. So here, it's the same for the motor and somatosensory. So I have his head here, there's his body, and his legs and his feet just flip over a little bit on the other side, and then there's his arms. So there's a guy in the homunculus that's standing on his head for both the somatosensory. That means the representation, the information coming up there, so the information going to the very tippy top, or the superior, or the dorsal part of the brain in this area is going to be coming from his feet. Okay, same thing happens here. There's his head, there's his body, and his feet with a little flip over the outside. We'll talk about the importance of that next week, or actually on Thursday. We're done. Let's play the brain. Okay, these representations are called homunculus or homunculi. There's two of them. Homunculus, homunculus. Okay, homunculus is nothing more than just a human representation of that area. Okay, I'm going through and labeling. So, in addition to the parietal, we have the occipital, and we have cerebellar, and we have temporal. Okay, just labeling in those others real quick. Now, there's two other important areas. There's one that's involved in speech. Somebody has difficulty, first of all, I'll tell you, it's a motor problem with speech. When they try and talk, they physically can't motorically move their mouth properly. Which lobe of the brain do you think that might be in? Frontal, yes. Okay, I'm going to make it pink. And it resides right here. And it is called Broca's area. So that's B-R-O-C-A, Broca's area. Okay, and that's going to be if somebody has difficulty talking motorically. Okay, they can't get the words out. And there's another area that's involved with speech. That's kind of, it's a little, mostly parietal, a little bit of temporal. It's going to exist right here. Believe it or not, that one's called Wernicke's area. That's W-E-R-N-I-C-K-E''S. And Wernicke's area is involved with speech comprehension. Yes? Broca's. B-R-O-C-A''S. Broca's area. And that's the motor production of speech. So people understand what you're saying, they just can't talk back to you motorically. Okay? Wernicke's area is where people, they don't understand what you're saying, and when they talk to you, it sounds like word salad. Like, oh, the blue dolphin in the corner is pretty today. And when you ask them how they're doing, that's Wernicke's area. Okay? Big difference between that. Somebody with Broca's, it's kinds of aphasia, really. Aphasia means difficulty with talking. But Broca's aphasia, if you ask them their name, they're going to say, it might take them 5 minutes to get out their name if they do that. Okay? Two different kinds. But two different areas of the brain. Broca's is in frontal. Wernicke's is temporal parietal. And then the last one, medial structure of the surface of the brain. LS. Okay. What kind of section is this? Yeah, this is a sagittal section of the brain. And if I told you that this area here is going to be the main connector between the left and right halves of the brain, the myelinated axons, what's the name of that? That's the corpus callosum. And again, when we pull the brains and we do a sagittal section, we're going to see this one. Bless you. Corpus callosum. Okay, there's your corpus callosum. There's kind of a famous gyrus. In addition to the pre- and post-central gyri, there's also another famous gyrus that lives on top of the corpus callosum. And I'm just going to put a squiggle in here for the gyrus. He's just sort of all this fold. This one's associated with the limbic system, or emotional responses, let's just say. We'll talk more about it when we talk about the reception of pain. This is called your cingulate. C-I-N-G-U-L-A-T-E, gyrus, G-Y-R-U-S. So your cingulate gyrus, part of your limbic system. Okay, other things that you can see on the medial surface of the brain if you did that you did a sagittal section. This big old nucleus here, that's a collection of neuronal cell bodies. Remember which one that one is? Yeah, that's going to be your thalamus. Okay, other little ones to worry about. Let's see, vision, let's make him orange. Back here on the back of the brain stem, so in the back, at the very back of the midbrain, there's two special little bumps that we're going to see when we pull the brains. There's one on the top, bless you, and then there's one on the bottom. Let's make that one brown. There's one on the top. Sure. Two little bumps on the very back end of the brain stem, posterior end of the brain stem. Okay. Those two little bumps have a special name. The topmost bump is the superior because it's above. Colliculus, C-O-L-L-I-C-U-L-U-S. The superior colliculus, we're going to find out, is associated with vision. And then the bottommost bump that's the superior colliculus. What do you think the one below it's called? That's the inferior colliculus. Correct. Yes, the superior colliculus is going to be associated with vision. The inferior colliculus is going to be associated with hearing. And we'll go through the auditory and visual pathways, and you'll see where they come to play. But these are actual physical bumps on the surface, the back end of the brainstem. You can see when the full brains. You good? Questions? Okay.